Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL Investigates senior producer Randal Kerr, we're talking about office space in light of the shift from working in the office to working remotely. Specifically, Randal's team looked at how the state is managing its office space and are they doing it efficiently? Randal, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So everywhere you go, especially in downtown Raleigh, you see these high rises where there's a lot of empty office space. And as a matter of fact, right near me, there's an office that has windows and you can look in and there's just row after row of empty desks. So I would imagine our state government is going through the same shift where a lot of people are now working from home.
It depends on the agency, really. We have some agencies like the Department of Corrections that they obviously need to be in their job. I mean, the bulk of their employees are correction officers, work in prisons. Then you have other agencies like the Department of Commerce where they can do a lot of their work remotely and they're trying to figure out the best way to move forward.
So is there a specific policy about remote work when it comes to state government, or does each department kind of get to decide how they want to handle that?
Right now, it's up to each agency. At the beginning of the pandemic, all the agencies were actually ordered by the State Office of Human Resources to really audit their own staff and talk and identify who had to be in the office, who didn't, who could do it part-time, and they even put percentages on it. And so every agency really had a blueprint pretty early on how to handle the pandemic. And now they're using that same model coming out of the pandemic with really what's state agencies are battling for employees just like private companies. And right now, the potential employee has a lot of power. And one of the big things they want is hybrid work. And the state is trying to figure out how to move forward from that.
Right. How do you balance what they need with what the department needs and also attract the best employees? And like you said, if a lot of them want hybrid work or they're coming from the private sector, it may be something that they expect and they demand. So I know the Department of Administration oversees these buildings. You spoke with the DOA Chief Deputy Secretary Mark Edwards. What did he say about how they're trying to manage this shift? You know, they've got all this office space. So how are they trying to manage the fact that they have office space, but they also have a lot of people working from home?
Sure. Well, to put everything into perspective, the Department of Administration has a website that breaks down all of the buildings that are owned by the state that they oversee. And they list them in different categories. We looked at the specific category of office for their buildings. The state has about 750 of them with almost 5 million square feet in office space.
That's a lot of office space.
That is a lot of, and we're talking, this is obviously across the state. So
Sure,
you're talking,
sure.
Some 200 square foot office spaces, which is technically a ranger station,
right,
at a state park.
Something small.
But there is a major shift going on right now within agencies. And like you said, each agency can do it. So we spoke to one secretary who is a proponent of working from your office. And so he has everyone in there. And the state, not only DOA, but what we found, which is interesting, is the General Assembly is now really interested in this and how to move forward. Because if we can sell buildings, we can make money.
Right,
if we don't need it.
So that's a benefit to the taxpayers, obviously.
Yeah, so they're actually, the General Assembly, we know of one, we've heard there may be 4 others, we're still trying to confirm. They've actually ordered basically workplace efficiency studies where they're looking at who's working, how much space you have, the space that you have, are you using it efficiently, and if not, how can we fix it? And so that from a legislative angle, that's going on right now as we try to figure out how we can still provide as a state the services that taxpayers pay for, but also be efficient in how we do it. I mean, there's no reason to spend extra money on electricity if you don't need to.
Absolutely.
And that's a benefit that people want right now is to have the flexibility, in their work and life.
Absolutely. Well, we will be right back after the break, and we're going to talk about some of these specific departments. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So I think it's interesting. You were talking about the different departments have different approaches. And to back up a minute, you were mentioning the electricity. I mean, if somebody's working from home, you're not paying for their electricity. You're probably not paying for their internet because they already have it. They may or may not already have a computer or a printer, or even if you're furnishing a computer, a lot of the other things that they have. They may have a desk chair. They may have a desk. These are all things the state would no longer have to pay for. So talk to me about the different approaches. I know the Department of Public Instruction, which oversees schools in North Carolina, they have a huge number of employees working from home.
Yeah, and the number that we have in our story, just to put it in context, the agencies that were ordered to identify workers that could work from home during the pandemic, they no longer are required to do that, but this was a survey that DPI sent out to its employees, and the results of what they've returned so far is 90% of their workers are somewhat remote hybrid. I mean, and they broke it down by different categories. Are you strictly hybrid? Are you strictly work from home? Are you in the office 1 to 49% of the time? Are you in the office 49 to 100% of the time? Or are you in the office the entire time? And when it came down to in the office the entire time, we're talking 10% of the workforce.
Wow. So that's a big number of people working hybrid. Absolutely. And of course, here at Capital Broadcasting, we have a lot of people working hybrid. We're in the booth right now. To be in the booth, we have to be at the station. But none of the other things I do require me to be at the station, So it's definitely a balancing act for sure. And when it comes down to using taxpayer dollars, that's a really important something that needs to be overseen. So you mentioned the Department of Commerce. They have a large number of people working remotely as well.
Yeah, and interestingly, Commerce and DPI, Department of Public Instruction, they share the same office building.
Okay.
So you're talking, 90% of DPI is hybrid most of the time, or a good portion of the time, and then Commerce has a large number of people also working there. So that we've asked both agencies multiple times if we could go in the buildings just to look around to see how full or empty it is, and they have not allowed us in yet.
And my guess is because it's pretty empty, possibly.
If the numbers they provided us are true, I would guess it's fairly empty. And one interesting thing that we don't get to in the story that I looked into is, we went back and actually looked. The state has an energy saving program where they have a goal by 2025 to cut their electricity by a certain amount. And during the pandemic, we expected to go and look at all the state office buildings and see a drastic decrease in electricity use, because back then people had to be at home. But the problem is, because of COVID, they had to upgrade all of the electrical systems and HVAC systems. So their electricity bills were actually working harder because they were recirculating air at a faster time.
Interesting.
So the electricity bills didn't even go down. So we're still paying those high electricity bills,
even
and
though people
still aren't
there. Right. And the other thing is, and this is not necessarily state buildings, but just all buildings, I noticed that there's a lot of lights on. Sometimes when you walk around downtown at night in some of these buildings, and I think, wow, I wonder if anybody's even working there or if they just keep the lights on. So that's definitely something to consider. Health and Human Services, largest department in North Carolina. And they have not a huge number of people remote, but they do have a significant number.
Yeah, and their numbers make sense when you think about it. I mean, a lot of what Health and Human Services does is they investigate things. They're on the streets anyway.
So direct contact with clients, right?
They're full. Those people in many cases are almost full-time remote because they're out talking to clients. If they're DSS, they're going and doing home inspections, nursing home inspections. So they're out of the building anyway.
Right.
But they do have a large contingency of people that are dealing with Medicare billing, Medicaid billing, that are in the office all the time.
Yeah. I know that you also talked to the insurance commissioner, Mike Causey. He's not a big fan of remote work, correct? And I know they did a study. You were talking about the studies to kind of see what people are interested in and what's efficient. What did they learn, and has he compromised on this?
He's compromised a little bit. He's still holding pretty steady. He believes that his agency serves the people, and he wants his people in office to serve. The interesting thing about the study you mentioned is because he's been a proponent in pushing to get his employees in the office. The legislature, that's one of the departments that the legislature ordered the study of workplace usage for, which he obviously wasn't a fan of. And then on top of it, once the study and the results were done, where it did identify more people that could work at home than he liked, but then the legislature sent him and the department a $100,000 bill for the study.
So that really didn't sit well.
No.
So what's going to happen going forward with this unused office space? Does it sit there empty, or do you think the state will try to reduce their on-site footprint, realizing that, paying the electric bill, for example, and paying for infrastructure that's not being used is really a detriment to the taxpayers?
Yeah, no one has come out clearly and said, we think the end game is going to be this, where we are going to offload property that we don't need, cut down office space. But if you common sense tells you, if private workplace is going that way, public workplace is going to go the same way. And I would be shocked over the next few years if we don't start consolidating some departments and let them share office space. And there's a lot of prime property downtown that the state owns, and just in Wake County.
Absolutely. So there's that's definitely something to look at. Well, Randal, thank you so much for explaining this and sharing the background on this. I know you and your team will continue to follow this. Please take a minute and give us a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts. Your rating and review will help other listeners find the show. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening.